Good morning. My name is Rebecca Spirito-Dolgan. And on behalf of the University of Scranton and our collaborator, the All One Foundation, I am pleased to welcome you to our first keynote session. We are thrilled to have more than 900 registered participants representing 39 states, along with participants from Canada, Mexico, and Argentina. It's great to see so many families and individuals living with autism, advocates and educators, employers and administrators, service providers, and vocational rehabilitation providers joining us. We have a program for you full of informative sessions. Some, like the one you're about to view, are happening live, and there are many more sessions available on demand under the All Sessions tab on your attendee page. All sessions, including today's live events, will be available to you as a registered participant for up to 90 days. We welcome you to join us in our virtual networking rooms during breaks and to spend some time exploring the entire event site, which is full of information about our speakers, sessions, and the ACE Collaborative. We hope you enjoy the conference. For this session, you are welcome to put your questions into the box on your screen, and we will have time for Q&A toward the end of the hour. Should you experience technical difficulties, please visit the FAQ troubleshooting guide found on the main event page. And now, please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Christopher Banks, CEO of the Autism Society of America. Christopher?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I am a University of Scranton graduate, very proud of that. So it's even more special for me to be here with you all. The excitement is really great, and the energy that this team has put together to bring this conference forward has been fantastic. As a loyal Royal Scranton grad, I do want to remember Father Pillar's and his illness and his recovery and the process that the university is going through in their transition for a new president. Our thoughts and prayers are with him and the university community during this time. As proof that I am a graduate, to start it, I thought I'd show you a little photo. That is my son and daughter wearing my cap and gown and holding my diploma from the University of Scranton Graduate School. A little bit about me. I went to the University of Scranton. I had the pleasure of working at the University of Scranton very briefly. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, I worked for Father Panuska, the namesake of this college, and where this program was coming from. And I had the pleasure to work with so many of the great people that are still at the university, like Jerry Zabatsky and others. I traveled quite a bit. I've had the opportunity to live in Micronesia on the island of Palau, where I taught grammar school for 2 years, thanks to an invitation by Father Ed Gannon, a Jesuit at the university, who encouraged me to do some service work after school. I tell you all of that because it's an important part of how do I get to the Autism Society of America, and how do I get involved in autism and get involved in the work that we are doing about autism from the Autism Society of America's perspective. I learned early on, very early on, from good men like Father Gannon, Father Panuska, Father Rock, and then many others like Father Ron McKinnon, who's still at the university, that it's my obligation to use the gifts and talents I have been given to make the life of others. So all of my work, all of my career has been in the not-for-profit sector. I've worked at higher education institutions, secondary education institutions. I've worked as consultant for organizations like Make-A-Wish, the United States Merchant Marine Academy, the Pontifical North American College in Rome. And I've worked in acute care settings, community-based hospital, Brookhaven, and then hospital systems like the Bon Secours Health System. All of it with the idea of, what can I do to make things better for others? What can I do to make things better for others? You know, Father Panuska taught me, whenever possible, rule in favor of the individual over the organization, and both will win out. He was very clear about that. And many people who had the privilege of working with him know exactly what I'm talking about, because we learned to live that. Here at the Autism Society of America, I get to live that every day. Every day I get to bring that excitement, that enthusiasm, that mission into my daily life. That's pretty rewarding. And in fact, that itself is the reward, right? And that itself is what I think all of us are trying to do. Make other people's lives better and get that sense of accomplishment, that sense of reward, that sense of really making a difference in other people's lives, right? Sure, there may be some financial gain, there may be academic credentials, there may be trophies, plaques, and whatever. It doesn't really matter to me, right? Just doesn't matter. Did you make a difference in other people's lives? Did you use the gifts and talents you have been given to make other people's lives better? You know, because when I do that, I start to feel better about myself, and I get more excited about the idea of going deeper and doing more. So the Autism Society of America recently was looking for a new CEO. My predecessor retired after a very successful 10-year career of really helping the organization at some critical moments of its history. And they wanted somebody who could bring some not-for-profit management experience, which I have a lot of. I also had a lot of experience with helping individuals with different disabilities. For some time, I worked at the National Theater Workshop for the Handicapped, a theater training school for the disabled, with Brother Rick Curry, a Jesuit brother from the Maryland province. And that gave me an insight to look at people differently than maybe we were seeing in the media, maybe we were seeing on the streets, in the malls, or at our sporting venues. Look differently. Look differently. Use the gifts, the eyes, my sight, my ears, my voice, to see, hear, and speak out differently. So I come to the Autism Society of America, and we clearly look at what we are doing and what we could be doing. We are the oldest autism organization in the country. We have 76 affiliates at the grassroots level across the United States. Some of them vary from very large service providers like the Autism Society of North Carolina and the great work that Terry Sheriff and his team are doing down there, or the Autism Society of Indiana with Greg Boyce and the super work he's doing and partnering with Indiana University and Kathy Pratt and all those folks there, to California, which has 7 affiliates within that state, Texas, which represents 5 different areas. And then we have small little affiliates where committed, dedicated parents want to make the world a better place for other people like their own children. One of the exciting things about the Autism Society of America is it's the spectrum. We cover the spectrum. We represent the spectrum of autism, and I can't open my arms wide enough to demonstrate that. So that means for me, I represent the self-advocates. And there are great organizations like ASAN who are doing great work to promote and promulgate the work of self-advocates. They're part of our organization. The Autism Society of America represents self-advocates. We also represent those who are quote unquote severe. And that is from the National Severe Autism Center, Jill Escher and her team in California, their terminology, not mine. All right. We represent those who have high communication needs and low support needs, high support needs and low communication needs, the spectrum, right? Individuals who can work at places like EY or Boeing. And you're going to learn more about that if you're tuning into Jose Velasco, a good friend of ours who is working with the Autism Society. And I'm going to talk more about that in our conversations about inclusion. We also represent all of the individuals on the spectrum in our advocacy work and what we do on the Hill. I know that there's a recorded session from Senator Casey, a good friend of the disability community. His father and mother were great friends of the disability community when I had the pleasure of working with Governor Casey and the University of Scranton on several projects. Always committed to it, and good folks there. So we do a lot of different things with our affiliates, with our advocacy work. We do a lot to support our affiliates, provide marketing and materials, et cetera. The Autism Society of America does not provide direct services. That is happening at the grassroots levels. We're the only organization in the United States that does that. And it makes us a very powerful voice for the autism community. You know, when I was growing up, there was a statement that you did to, for, with, and by, right? Things were to, for, with, and by. Very much the same now, right? Sometimes the work we do is to, sometimes it's for, sometimes it's with, and sometimes it's by the autism community at large, individually or collectively. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about inclusion, because the word inclusion is very important and it brings us to a lot of things. I also want to share with you a little bit of a video we have about that. So let me start with that. It's a video that we're very proud of at the Autism Society of America, and it was released in the middle of COVID for our Autism Awareness Month. Can you believe that April seems, I don't know about for you, but for me, that seems like a year ago, 2 years ago, maybe 8 years ago for some of us. It was only several months ago. So let me share my screen, share this video, and then I'll come back.
Did you know that it was that high? Did you think it would be that high? No. Yeah, and I think they deserve the same chance as everybody else.
I would say maybe 70%. I don't think I know that either.
True or false? Autism is the fastest growing developmental disorder in the United States.
True. True.
True.
People are always able to tell if someone is autistic simply by looking at their physical appearance.
False.
False. False. I would say false.
False.
Autism spectrum disorder affects people of all races, ethnicities, and socioeconomic groups.
True. I think true.
True.
And the final question is, true or false? 3.5 million people in the United States are on the autism spectrum.
True.
I would probably say true.
True?
True?
True.
And by the way, myself and the entire production crew is on the autism spectrum themselves.
I did not know that. The world can treat people better with autism by treating them like they're normal.
So I apologize for the little technical difficulty in the video, but you got the gist of this. And what we're sharing was the idea that the video, let's turn that off. Sorry about that. I was continuing to get the video feed from YouTube. We released that video during the Autism Awareness Month, and we were really excited about the idea that we produced it with an entire crew that was on the spectrum. And very much what was said there, we did not tell anybody that the team was on the spectrum. Those were people on the street who we asked to answer questions about their perceptions of autism. We didn't know any of the folks that we interviewed prior to engaging this film company. It was really an exciting way for us to talk about inclusion in a different way. And our theme for the Autism Awareness Month was celebrate differences, right? And look at that as a different, unique opportunity for inclusion. So let's talk a little bit about inclusion. And in order to do that, I have to go back to my Jesuit education. And I have to go back to what Father Pat Moore and Tom Garrett told me in my philosophy classes, which were, Chris, you must define your terms before we begin the conversation. We need to make sure that everybody's using the same definitions. So let's do that. I'm going to try to share my screen again. Hopefully it'll be a little less complicated there. You'd think after doing so many of these Zoom meetings, after so many months, I'd be able to get it right all the way. I'm still human. So let's try that again. Let me share my screen and see if I can pull this video, this slideshow up and share. Building inclusivity into everyday life. We at the Autism Society believe that's really what we should be working towards. How do we include it into everything we're doing? So let's go back to Father Pat Moore and Tom Garrett telling me to define my terms. Inclusion is about recognizing the worth and pride of all people through involvement and empowerment. Let's keep that in your mind as we talk a little bit more about it. What does it mean to keep individuals involved? And what does it mean to empower them? Right? It's one thing to bring somebody to a gathering. It's another to make sure they're involved in the gathering. It's another to make sure they feel empowered to participate the way they want to. I think about when we invite a friend to a party or a gathering like this picture has it. It's one thing to just invite them to it. It's another to say, we want you to be a part of it. And we want want you to help us direct where we're going to go and what we're going to do. All right. Inclusive communities promote a fair sense of belonging by valuing, hearing, empowering, and practicing respect. Right? All very important. And I love that they bring into this conversation the definition that includes, right? It goes beyond just tolerance, right? It goes on celebrating and elevating gifts and talents to use. How do we include those gifts and talents? How do we help others through this? Right? So I want to put this a little bit into the context of coronavirus and what has the Autism Society done and how is inclusion a part of this? Well, as I told you, it starts with the fact that March 13th, the country gets shut down. We've been preparing for Autism Awareness Month. In fact, through our organization and our affiliates, 350 events were canceled in the month of April. 350 autism-related events, fundraising events, walk events, community fairs, health fairs, job fairs, sporting events, all kinds of events were canceled that we had planned and prepared to work toward inclusion of individuals and to celebrate their difference, right? We had to pivot. I've come to really have disdain for that word in many ways, but it really is what we had to do. We had to pivot. We had to change what we were going to do. So what did we change to? Well, first and foremost, we got involved in the public policy conversations. We got involved in making sure that our legislators at the Capitol Hill, including Senator Casey, Senator Grassley, representatives from all of the constituencies that we represent, we needed to make sure they were in the center of the conversation. You know, too often we don't include them in the thinking. Individuals on the spectrum need to be a part of the thinking of what we're going to do. Case in point, in the state of New York, today, the reopening of that state's plan still does not include the disabled community and those living in group homes and congregate settings. We continue to fight that fight at a grassroots level out in Nassau and Suffolk counties on Long Island, as well as in Western New York and Buffalo and other small villages and towns in between there, where individuals who are living in congregate and group homes who are on the spectrum are not part of the thought process and the plan for how do we open up our country, our state in that state. That's happening in many different places. Some places have really gotten it great because they've included individuals on the spectrum and developmental disabilities in their thinking. When legislation was coming forward with funding, we needed to make sure that we knew what the individuals with autism needed and then get those proposals to Congress, right? And let me tell you a little bit about what does that look like? Well, it looks like this. When a representative of a state starts reading comments that we provided to them from individuals on the spectrum or from their parents, that's powerful. We know that we are including the voice of the individuals on the spectrum in the legislative decision-making process. When they finally passed their emergency funding, we were advocating for personal protection equipment for hospitals and nursing homes. I had to call several members of Congress and say, hey, you have group homes that don't have PPEs, but yet you're giving them to a variety of other people. Please make sure you remember group homes, congregate settings in your disbursement of the PPEs. And we did that, and we were able to get that. We are involved in the conversations. Down the road from me right here is the NIH. We're in Bethesda, Maryland, our offices. And we are talking with the individuals at the NIH as well as the CDC in Atlanta about what they're doing and how they're going to include individuals with autism in their thought process. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when we talk about some of the services we've done. And then, of course, we want to make sure that our voice, the voice of the individuals with autism, autistic people, are in the conversations with the Developmental Disability Council, with our advocacy, and a variety of other ways. So we continue to advocate for funding for home and community-based services. Very important right now in education. Individuals who are on the spectrum and have other developmental disabilities are not always included in the plan for how do we reopen our schools. How do we reopen our workplace? What does mass transit look like for individuals with disabilities, specifically autism, right? What does that thought process look like? Also, what are we doing about direct support services for direct support personnel and supporting them? What are we doing about Medicaid day programs? So many individuals on the spectrum are in day programs that have been canceled. They've been canceled because they can't support it. What are we going to do to help them? And then again, supported employment. Employment is huge. We're going to talk a little bit about that when I talk about some other things we did with the COVID coming up. You're going to be talking about it this afternoon with Jose Velasco about what does employment look like going forward, an area that the Autism Society is very much involved in. We also want to make sure that we continue to advocate for funding for special education and related services like physical and speech therapies. And again, as I said, you know, our grassroots effort really paid off because we've had thousands of phone calls brought into to our elected officials. We've gathered hundreds of personal stories, letters have been written, and we continue to make sure that we're telling the story of individuals with autism, either from those who are self-advocates, to those who need assistance with that, to those who use augmented speech devices, those who are minimally or nonverbal. And we'll learn more about that as I talk about some of the education we've done as a result of this. And again, the context for this is not to self-promote the Autism Society of America as much as it is to talk about we must live our truth. The Autism Society of America must live its truth. And to live its truth means that we must include individuals on the spectrum in our thinking, in our planning, and in our execution of those plans, right? So we immediately responded with the toolkit when COVID happened. We were the first autism organization to do that. Many, many people have brought toolkits together. I know I shared this toolkit with Deb Pellegrino and the others at Scranton when this occurred. The NBA has picked this up. It has been used across the world. I made a decision early on in our discussions with the autism community that I would not use this as an opportunity to raise money, and I would not prohibit the use of anything we produce by anybody, including everybody in our tools. I wanted to make sure that everything we were able to gather, we made available to everybody as much as we could. So we made a conscious decision not to do a fundraising campaign tied to COVID-19. We have evolved into asking people to help support our efforts because it takes time, energy, and money, but we also wanted to make sure we got this out as much as we could. So we know that over 120,000 people have accessed our toolkit, which has great information on it. And if you haven't seen it, please go to our website, autism-society.org, autism-society.org, and you'll see more great information there. And again, you're free to use it. Please use it, take it, share it, do what you need to do with it. When we found out that our individuals living in group homes and congregate settings weren't getting the help they needed, we worked with an organization called Make Waves, a great foundation that does a lot of terrific work. And they provided us with 53,000 masks. At that time, we identified the hotspots in the United States where we had affiliates, and we got masks to them so they could get them into the right setting. Again, because Congress wasn't doing it, governors weren't doing it, local officials weren't doing it, so we did it. We know that about 158,000 people have been watching our Corona information series, which is a weekly, now bi-weekly because of scheduling, conversation with self-advocates and experts. We've done 26 of those so far since the beginning of April, end of March, excuse me on that. And about 6,000 people have downloaded these social stories that we have created, which are, you know, we're all familiar with social stories and how important they are with individuals with autism and teaching them and training them in a methodical way. Well, we turned around and said, well, how do we educate individuals about wearing masks? How do we educate them about washing hands? How do we educate them about social distancing? And we continue to use that. And we continue to work to make sure that it includes those in the Spanish-speaking population. Inclusion, we gotta keep thinking inclusion in the way we work. And as I say to our team, we must live our truth. So we created this information series, and I've put up on the screen 3 that I'm really excited that we've done. Of the 26, I think these are the three that have had the most impact on me. There's one other, but so let me tell you a little bit about this. So the two gentlemen that are on this screen are both, by their own definition, one minimally speaking, the other nonverbal. They both use augmented speech device or speech coach help assistance. On the left is Samuel Capozzi. Sam Capozzi, young man who graduated from the University of California in May. He is now a law student and a member of the Autism Society of Ventura County board. He's on our strategic plan. We invited him to our strategic planning committee. We included him because he was, by his own definition, minimally speaking. He was on the spectrum. He wants to be an advocate as he grows up, as he completes his education, and he wants to be a legal defense representative and advocate. We wanted to include those components into our conversation. Sam had a great line. He said, just because I'm nonverbal does not mean I'm non-thinking. Let that sit in for a second. Just because I'm nonverbal doesn't mean I'm non-thinking. We don't include Sam and individuals like Sam. How do we know what they're thinking? How do we do the to, for, with, and by without Sam's voice in the conversation? On the far right of your screen is another young man, Hari Siranavasi. Hari is also a student at UC Berkeley. He's an activist and much more than that. Hari teaches a required class to the students at UC Berkeley in the undergraduate program. He's an undergraduate student himself, and he's teaching a class that is required, part of the core curriculum, mandatory. Now, Hari talks about something that is very important, which I'm going to save the tagline for in a little bit. But his whole conversation about he wants to be in. He wants to be involved. He wants to be empowered. How is he empowered? Well, he belongs to a fraternity. He's the president of the student body for the individuals with developmental disabilities. When COVID hit, he was most concerned about all the time and energy he put into developing relationships that now are going to be dissipated. How does he bring that back? How does he incorporate electronic socialization into his life, right? In the middle screen is just a clip of a conversation we had with the state of Qatar in the Middle East. They have been great supporters. The state of Qatar, that is, has been great supporters of the Autism Society of America. The ambassador from Qatar to the United States has been phenomenal in his sharing of resources. And he asked us to host a conversation with individuals on the spectrum in Qatar about what we're learning here in the United States about education and how to have the individuals with autism included in the thought process and conversation. Very powerful, very powerful. A lot of views for all of that across the nation. So what I wanted to say about Hari was this: inclusion leads to belonging. Inclusion leads to belonging. Let me tell you a little bit about some of the national statements to root out exclusion that we have been involved in. How many of you remember the TikTok challenge called Autism Challenge? We were made aware of it on a Wednesday, and late afternoon on a Wednesday, by early evening, we had put out a statement demanding TikTok shut down this offensive challenge. We had no response from them, but we did get response from the Today Show. We got response from a couple of other shows across the nation, and other organizations were also involved in this. And within a week, TikTok shut down the Autism Challenge. We had to make a statement, and we wanted to make a statement on June 1st to acknowledge that there was challenges within our race understanding in the United States of America, and that we had civil and human rights issues that needed to be addressed. On July 7th, we issued a second statement about this as the country was still reeling in all of the protests and the demonstrations and the violence and the turbulence and the breakdown in communication because we weren't including each other in the conversation. On September 9th, we had this horrible accident in Salt Lake City where Lyndon Cameron was shot after the police had been called by his mother to help de-escalate a situation. And when we issued our statement against that shooting by the Salt Lake police officers, what we reminded all of law enforcement is that the affiliates that we have the programs to train the officials in their local communities about how to safely interact, communicate, and have conversations with individuals with autism and their families. And then this week, we will be issuing a statement regarding the current Supreme Court nominee. We're a nonpartisan organization. We don't want to tell Congress this or that, the president this or that. We do say, please remember us when you're doing the work you do. And right now, we've asked them to carefully review the Supreme Court nominees' rulings and opinions regarding individuals with disabilities. These are the things that we're trying to do to live our truth about inclusion. And those are just some of the many statements we've made recently. So, sorry about that, I advanced too far. So let's look at some community inclusion. To have community inclusion, they need to participate and be accepted by other individuals. It means we must educate people who do not have these current situations, conditions or comorbidities or co-occurrence of activity. We need to include others in the conversation about how to do that. I'm continuing to learn the language. I'm continuing to learn the dialect. I'm continuing to learn how to incorporate what I'm getting and learning now into what I say, what I write, how I act. It's a learning process. My experience has been that the autism community is very understanding of someone working to learn. I don't think that they demonstrate much patience for people who refuse to learn. And I agree. If we're not going to learn, we're going to remain ignorant. If we remain ignorant, we're going to make some bad mistakes. So inclusion and acceptance by other individuals means that they have to participate, educate, and learn from them. It's going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of effort, right? Community inclusion takes a lot of time. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those community inclusions in a minute. I think we have to learn the practices of the community and get accustomed to new things as individuals on the spectrum. You know, for example, when COVID occurred, there was a young man by the name of Joshua Stevens, a 19-year-old mechanical engineering student from Marshall University, who was on one of Facebook Lives, and he's the fourth of the series that I'm really quite excited about. And I said to Josiah at the end of it, I said, Josiah, what would you like to see we learn in the autism community from COVID? And what would you like the autism community to teach the greater community? And he was very quick in his response. He said, you know, Chris, as soon as the nation shut down, we made all kinds of accommodations for school, for work, for recreation, for food, all kinds of accommodations. I've been fighting my whole life for accommodations. Can't we make it part of our daily work? I said, wow. I'm a 19-year-old man saying, look, we've learned how to make accommodations. Let's make these accommodations on a regular basis, and let's teach people how to do that. And that included individuals on the spectrum as well as neurotypical. And that meant things like Josiah learning how to reschedule classes, reconvene with his friends on a social network platform so that he continued his relationship building that he was doing, much like Hari was doing at UC Berkeley, Josiah was doing at Marshall University in West Virginia. I think that members of our community at large have to learn and get accustomed to new members. We have to get used to the idea that somebody may not look us in the eye when we're having a conversation with them. You know, Jose may talk about this, but there are many organizations out there working on job interview skills and helping the hiring manager, not the candidate, the hiring manager to understand what he or she could or couldn't do and should or shouldn't do. If you had the chance on Sunday to watch 60 Minutes, they had a segment on employment in the autism community. If you haven't, I encourage you to go back and look at it. There are many organizations helping with the employment issue in the United States. Jose will talk more about that, I'm sure. But one of the things that is very important for the Autism Society of America is to make sure that we are educating the hiring manager, the supervising manager, the colleagues about how to work with an individual who has a different way of processing and communicating than they do, or than is, quote, typical, or, quote, normal, or, quote, what we're comfortable with. I learned a long time ago to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's where growth occurs. Get comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's where growth occurs. I think that that's what we mean when we say get out of their comfort zone. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Right? I have found it to be extremely rewarding, and I have found it to change the way I look at things. You know, the CEO of EY was asked by Anderson Cooper last week about this employment. And she rightly said, and I have been saying this since I became part of the organization, that we have to stop thinking about helping individuals with autism or those in the developmental disability as an altruistic endeavor. And start remembering it's the right thing to do. It's just the right thing to do. And as a result of it, all of us are going to benefit. All of us. President Kennedy said in his inaugural speech, the rising tide raises all the boats. Well, if we make this a stronger environment, everybody's going to get better. Everybody's going to get better. We're going to be richer. We're going to be more diverse. We're going to have a different flavor to our society, our community, when we think about inclusion and how to move forward with that. So let's talk a little bit real quick about what the Autism Society of America is doing with inclusion and where I think we need to be. We have to continue to advocate to influence policymakers and decision makers in their policies and their procedures and practice. Senator Casey was gracious enough to let us review and comment on a piece of legislation that he's proposing for education of law enforcement. We have worked with Senator Grassley on a similar type of situation. Advocacy for us is about achieving equity and social justice, right? And equity and equality are different. If you remember the graphic, and I apologize, I wish I should have put it in here, but you know, there's a cartoon of three people trying to watch a baseball game, and there are holes in the fence, and the three people are of different heights. Equality is giving everybody the same size box to stand on, no matter where the hole is. That's equality. Equity is giving them the right size box so they can look through the hole and see the ball game, right? And that's what I think we have to continue to make sure we're advocating for and working towards. On the education side, we have to make sure that our teachers are working to bond and care in relationship with students with autism. Seems simple, right? Seems so simple, but doesn't happen. We're seeing it time and time again where, because of COVID, individuals with special needs and special education programs are not being included in the thinking about how to return back to quote unquote normal, whatever that means. However, I know this, that when I talk to parents about the challenges and frustrations, they say, you know, my child has developmental disability needs. They're on the spectrum, and you're putting a computer in front of them and telling them to spend time watching that for 5 hours. And this one person said, I'm a bank teller, Chris. I don't know how to teach my child the way his teachers teach it. But we're sitting there watching this monitor for 5 hours. Now, one of the things we started to look at was, what are the alternatives? So I met a father who was teaching his 10-year-old son life skills. And one of the life skills he taught his son was how to change the oil in their car. He drove the car up onto the curb, has it a little slant, got the oil pan underneath it, and he brought his son through the process of a life skill. I know of a woman in Philadelphia. She took her let her daughter turn their front lawn into a garden. Turned the entire front lawn into a garden. They planted herbs, they planted vegetables, a lot like many people did, but life skills. How do we do that? Others have changed the education model to help them work on things like routines, schedules, measuring, Maybe it's a simple thing like learning how to make the coffee for the family, right? And those teachers are teachers in every sense of the word, whether they're a bank teller, a painter, or whether they've got a degree in education from the University of Scranton. We're all teachers, right? Education we're promoting is making sure that opportunities are there for friends in school, in the neighborhood. And that's about that accommodating and including people in what we're doing. And we use education as that social network. A lot about employment here, but obviously that it is positive, that it's supportive and well-structured. That we're training the hiring manager, we're training the supervisors, and we're training the colleagues, right? We're doing orientation and onboarding to make sure people understand what's happening. And notice we have structured training here, works well within the autism community. Housing, very excited about some of the work we're seeing in Arizona at First Place, a great residential community that is almost exclusively populated for individuals with developmental disabilities, built in the neighborhood of Phoenix, Arizona, right there in the streets, right in the community. There's others who are doing mixed-use buildings with retail, with individuals with autism, and with seniors. What an exciting thing to have seniors who need that relationship and that bonding to be included in the conversation with individuals with autism and included in the conversation with business development. That's where we at the Autism Society want to be. And that's where we think bringing this whole topic forward for all of us is so important. We're in the process of a strategic plan that'll bring us through all of that. I'm not going to bore you with all of this, but I wanted to let you know this doesn't happen by just waking up and saying, what are we going to do? It's got to be thought out. It's got to be a plan. Notice up top, it has to have a development plan. You have to be able to pay for this. And I'm not expecting government to pay for all of this. I am looking for private and public partnerships where philanthropic communities come together with not-for-profit organizations, and we work together with our elected officials to find best solutions. And each of those components must have individuals on the spectrum. Our strategic planning process includes a variety of task forces, and every task force had two requirements for me. They had to include individuals on the spectrum, and there needed to be diversity. That had to be a component for every of our task force. It also had to have representatives from all of our affiliates across the country. So we'll be revamping it. We're looking at a new branding and marketing, and we're looking at how we change our database and what we're doing with that. Not because it's important to tell you all about computers, but to tell you that for so long, the Autism Society of America has been the pinnacle place for receiving information and referrals about programs and services in the local communities. And we need to build that up, and we need to make it user-friendly. We need to make it on a platform that our affiliates can use, which is why we have the Salesforce program. So once we do all of that, then we can look at what our expansion initiatives are. The national programs that the Autism Society of America are going to be doing are some law enforcement training, some safety training. We're looking at a new employment model, and we're looking at life cycle planning. All of these include individuals on the spectrum who are going to be involved in the design and the implementation of the training for law enforcement. We're going to be in part of the safety training. Our Greater Akron affiliate, which was our affiliate of the year this year, has a great training program for safety with swimming with the YMCA. We all know, I hope, the horrific statistics related to water safety and autism, and we need to work on that, and we can't turn a blind eye to that. The employment model, we're going to look at all the different ways. I like to talk about this in a very quick way. If we're thinking about inclusion and we're thinking about employment, we must remember that there are individuals who can do the database tie-in tech stuff and those who cannot. And so what am I talking about? I like to use the example of Kroger's, the largest retail supermarket in the nation. Kroger's needs somebody who can help them work their database and run their IT and look at inventory. It also needs somebody who can get the shopping carts, run the flower shop, and work in the bakery. And individuals on the spectrum can fulfill those professional and non-professional jobs and roles. And we need to make sure that we look at that. Lifespan planning, wow. We have so much to talk about there as individuals in education are looking at, what happens with that 14-year-old girl who needs to figure out what a career path is in college may not be that place to go? What kind of training are we providing for her? But it continues. You know, Ruth Sullivan, one of the founders of the Autism Society of America's son, is in his early 60s. Well, where's he going to live as he ages? What does his assisted living facility look like? And how have those employees been trained to include him in their thinking and in their planning? And when he goes to need skilled nursing, what have we done there in our lifespan planning to accommodate for him there? What kind of inclusion is there? Our advocacy effort is continuing to do law enforcement reform, to move down to the state level. And I want to see us develop an autism justice center where individuals can come for a one-stop shop of help and support. You know, final thoughts here. I have two. Living with autism is a human rights issue. If we don't address this as a human rights issue, we will forever be battling a fight that we cannot win. Just like civil rights is still not fully recognized, but yet we have made progress as a country. We have a long way to go. The same exists with the autism community. When I think about what Ruth Sullivan wrote in 1965 about the Autism Society, and when I think of what John Donovan wrote in A Different Key, The Story of Autism, and what I think about now and the progress we've made, right? We must make this a human rights issue. We must. And lastly, I would say, let's go back to Hari Saravanathan. Inclusion leads to belonging. He has a sense of belonging at UC Berkeley because he's been included in so much of that college community's life. That's what the Autism Society of America wants to continue to promote. That's what we want to be a part of. So I thank you all. That is where I end my slideshow. I'd be happy to answer any questions or comments if you have any, but I thank you. I thank the University of Scranton for, one, for my education, but two, for providing me with the opportunity to share with you. And hopefully I've given you some things to think about as you go about the rest of the training for this program. Inclusion leads to belonging. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. It is so wonderful to know that the autism community has such a comprehensive organization in their corner and helping them with so many of these amazing initiatives. We really appreciate the time that you've spent with us this morning. We do have time for a couple of questions if you're willing.
Sure.
Terrific. The first one is, where would you recommend looking for services for persons who have more complex needs?
So I'm going to be a little self-serving, I guess. Look to the Autism Society of America. Call us at our 1-800-3-AUTISM, 1-800-3-AUTISM. Come to our website, autism-society.org. Actually, I'll put it in the chat right now. No, I want to do that. Don't want to do that. Sorry.
We can post that information.
Can you post that in there?
Sure.
That's really, that's a great place for us to go. We have a helpline. We have folks who are there to man calls. We get lots of calls from moms and dads and from individuals on the spectrum. The neat thing about it is we have some individuals on the spectrum. We have some parents who are part of the helpline. So, you know, nothing like somebody who's gone through that experience to help you navigate it. And it happens on a regular basis. You know, when I talked to Tom Kelly, we talked about the idea that, you know, I got a 10-year-old son, he's just diagnosed. Now what do I do? Well, we know how to help you get through that. And the Autism Society of America represents individuals who have high support needs and low communication capacity, as well as those who are able to do much more. So we're happy to help there.
Terrific. Another question that we have is regarding the presentation that was on 60 Minutes this past week that you mentioned. Do you know if there's a list of companies that are seeking to employ people with autism that was mentioned on that segment?
There is. And what I would say is, off the top of my head, I don't know the name of the, I don't have the website to get, but Jose Velasco, who was your speaker this afternoon, will definitely be speaking about that because he's very much involved in Autism to Work, Autism at Work, which has companies like EY, Boeing, General Dynamics, there's a variety of us in that conference. But yes,
Terrific.
and I'll be happy, Rebecca, I'll be happy to send that link to you directly so you could set it out, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
Absolutely. We would be happy to post that, and we
Great.
will. That presentation that you mentioned with Jose Velasquez is happening at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time live on our event. So we'll be looking forward to that. We have another question that goes in a slightly different direction.
Sure.
This one is stated, for an advocate in an area with very limited resources for those on the spectrum, they're trying to find a program that would help a family get financial assistance for them to work towards guardianship of their 18-year-old child with severe autism.
Right. Sounds like something I was just dealing with 2 weeks ago. There's a young woman in southern New Jersey who was trying to navigate how she's going to handle the challenges that are going to face her daughter as she becomes an adult and what she needs to do. What we do is we at the Autism Society, if you reach out to us, we're happy to provide some direction for that. There's there's a good number of attorneys who practice in this area that will help organizations. And there are several not-for-profits that are established to help families with this challenge. Right? And the Council on Developmental Disabilities, the CDD, has resources in every state in the nation. And we're happy to put people in touch with that. Again, reach out to me directly and I'll be happy to collaborate and get that to them.
We appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing all of these terrific web resources with us. I know that many of our participants will be headed right to your website to gather all of the pertinent details. We want to thank you again, Chris, for spending the time with us this morning. We really appreciate all of the information that you've shared with us. For our participants, we would like to make sure that we send you to visit our networking Zoom rooms. We're not available on campus as we usually would, but in this virtual environment, there are some networking opportunities for you in our break sections. There are some Zoom rooms set up. Also, there is one specific to the ACE Collaborative if you'd like to learn more about that, or you're one of those individuals living in those 13 counties, you're welcome to join that one at the virtual attendee hub in the ACE tab. So I guess we're going to sign off for now, but we do have another live session at 1 p.m. with Dr. Temple Grandin, and we'll hope you'll continue to join us. Thank you again so much, Chris, for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.